Hi, this tutorial is going to cover creating a federated search on a GridFS repo after transferring files to it using a migration. This tutorial is going to cover the migration itself as well as setting up the search. So to begin with, we have files in our file system and we're going to move them to the GridFS repository that we have running. So first we need to make the repository connection. Since this is just a file system connection, that one's already made. If you use a different repository to transfer files from, you'll have to look at the documentation on your specific connection for more details. Next, we're going to make the authentication connection that will allow us to connect to GridFS. At the bottom here of this authentication connections page, we're going to click Create New Auth Connection. We'll give it a descriptive name. And then for the type, we will set it to Authentication for MongoDB GridFS, and then click Save to edit. Here we'll type in username and password for our Mongo user. This user in particular has admin access to all databases, and the connection URI is going to look like this. This means that the user and password from here are going to be passed in, and we're going to authenticate against the admin database. So simplify here is a user in admin that has access to all databases, and later on we're going to be transferring files to this database, GridFS TSearch tutorial. So now I'm going to click Save. Now that the authentication connection has been made, we can make the output connection. This is going to allow us to output our files to GridFS from our file system. So I've gone to output connections on the left hand side here, and then at the bottom click Create New Output Connection. I'm going to give it a name, description, and finally the type is going to be the GridFS output connector. After that, click Save to edit and choose the authentication connection you made for here. And then we're going to go over to server, and this information is largely going to be the same that we inputted from the authentication connection. So the same user, a connection URI is actually just going to be the same thing, and finally the database will be the same. And then we'll click Save, and we'll test, and our connection is working. Next, we're going to create our GridFS Content Services connector. This part of the step is important because it's going to allow TSearch later on to properly perform the functions that it needs to do. So at the bottom here, Federation, we're going to click on Content Service Connections. Now, at the bottom, Create New Content Service Connection. We're going to give it a name, a description. For the type, we're going to choose Brew GridFS. Our connection URL is going to look familiar. It's going to be that same MongoDB URL. Now our database is going to be where we want our files to be output again. So this is where the content service connector is going to read files from later on. We're not going to use a file store for this. Our security mode will be authentication connection again. We'll choose our old authentication connection. And then finally, we will scroll back up and save this. Now we will make our job. We're going to go to List Jobs here on the left under Migration. At the bottom, Create New Job, give it a name. Our repository connection will be our file system repository connection, or alternatively, this will be the connection that you created for the repository you want to pull files from. And finally, our output connection will be that GridFS output connection we made. We're going to keep our job as just a simple migration. Save, and then it will allow you to edit the job further. Under Repository Content Service Connector, you want to set that GridFS Content Service Connector that we made earlier. You can set the start and end time here if you wish to only pull files that have been modified between certain dates from your file system. I'm going to leave that alone. By default, it covers the previous year. Next, we're going to go to repository paths. Here is where we can add what files we want to pull off of our file system by specifying their folder. I'm going to use this folder that I had pre-prepared and then click Add. And that's all I need to do there. Next is the output configuration. So the output bucket will be the bucket in the database in GridFS that we want the files to live in. I'm just going to name this TSearch tutorial bucket. I will leave the thread count by its default. It's important that you make sure that include simplify metadata is checked. TSearch is going to need this data later on in order for certain widgets to work and for you to be able to see your files in the search. And then also ensure that you use GridFS as source repository is checked. This is another important step later on for federation. Finally, after making sure that these have been set, go ahead and click Save. Now we're going to run this job and hopefully everything's been configured correctly. I'm going to go to Run and Monitor Jobs. We can see here, this is the job we've created. If we click play, the job will start up. And after a few seconds here, I'm going to refresh to see the progress. You see it's completed. It's read the 9 files it had in that directory and written 9 files over to GridFS. So none of those are housed there and they're ready to be viewed in TSearch. So now we're going to go through the setup and configuration of the federation side of things now that the migration is over with. To begin with, we're going to scroll down to Federation and choose Constant View Connections. From here, you want to create a new Constant View connection, give it a connector name, a description, and finally for type, we're going to do MongoDB GridFS search connector. Again, connection URL, Authentication Connection, and then we're going to go down here to add a configuration parameter. Parameter name will be DB, and our parameter value is going to be, again, the name of that database that we're uploading our files to. In this case, it's gridfs-tsearch-tutorial, and then I'm going to click Save, and that is what the configuration should look like on this tab. Now we're going to go to Search Configuration. So our Simplify Services URL is going to be the URL to Simplify Admin, which for this case is just here. This 8081 might be 8080 for you by default. I have that changed. Our collection is going to be that bucket that we output our files to. The result link is going to determine what happens when a user clicks on the file shown in the search, the link of the file. In this case, we'll just set it to download. Our facet fields and our field list do 2 different things. So the facet fields list here will determine which fields we wish to return statistics on, such as the unique number of occurrences or the number of occurrences of a type of value. And our field list is going to be which fields to return in the first place. So we're just going to do the same one for both in this case. And keep in mind that anything you have in facet fields that you want to collect statistics on, you also need to have in field list, since this determines what gets returned in the first place. Our facet limit, on the other hand, is the max number of facet values to return, while the minimum does the opposite, where it determines the minimum number of facet values needed to be returned as a field. We'll leave the limit at 0, so no limit, but we'll make our minimum 1. The date field we want to use for our facets will be simplify last modified. All of these simplify fields are set because we had use simplify metadata turned on earlier during this tutorial, so that's why that's come up now. And we will leave the rest of these in their default state. More information about each of these fields can be found in the documentation. And then I'm going to click Save here at the top. Now that the Constant View connection has been made, what we can do is create the constant view itself. new view. The short name is just going to be the same name as that connector we made earlier, so GridFS content view. Our type will be, we'll go with simplify virtual repository template, and our display name will be that. And finally, our search connection is going to be, again, the content view connection we made before. Now I'm going to click Save. So this is where you're able to edit the view of your search by different sections. We'll start with top menu. So the left column here shows the available widgets we can add to the top menu section, and this section, section widgets, shows which ones we already have. So we'll upload a document to a source repository, and you can see it's appeared here. We're going to go to body next. So by default, again, these are what will display on the body of a file returned by TSearch. But there is actually a widget that's missing. So we're going to go ahead and save this and create an instance of this widget here, widget instances. So what's going on here is there's a definition for this widget I want to create already, but there's not been an instance made for it yet. So I have to make that. At the time you're watching this video, this widget instance already may exist, and you may be able to skip this step. And our definition is going to be checkout file widget. The definition is essentially the blueprint of the widget itself. I'm going to click continue. And then for the name, I'm going to name it checkout file widget. And I'll leave the rest of these at their defaults. And then I'm going to click save. I'm going to do the same thing, create a new widget instance, but this time the definition will be check-in file widget. Continue. The name will be check-in file widget. And then again, I'll leave these configurations as their default. I'm going to click save. I'm going to go back down to my content view. Here it is. I'm going to edit it with this button. The check-in and checkout widgets, their definitions define them as a body type section, so we'll go here. And now you can see that they are in the available widgets where they were not before, and so I can add them. And now here, now that I've added them, I can't just save this. However, when changes have been made that you want to reflect in TSearch with your content view, you need to also publish them. So I'm just going to go ahead and do save and publish. Alternatively, if you've already clicked save on the right here, you can publish the view. And now that that's done, what I can do is go to TSearch. I already have this pulled up, so I'm going to go home. So this is where the home of TSearch is. So if you type in your simplify server /TSearch, you'll be here. Under search views, you can see I have a GridFS content view I created earlier. I'm going to go ahead and open that up, and by default, it's just going to search through everything I uploaded to GridFS. And here's the body of the file, so you can see the check-in and the checkout widget buttons. So with this file, I'll click the checkout button. This modal appears letting me know the file has been checked out. This widget is the checkout or check-in button, sorry. And I have some options here, so I can undo the checkout if all I want to do is revert it back basically, or I can add a check-in comment and choose the file and then click check-in. And by doing that, I'm going to update the file as well as checking it in and adding a comment to the metadata of the file in GridFS. And that basically sums up creating a federated search. You can find more information about different widgets and federated searches in general in our documentation, but this was the basic way to view your content from GridFS in TSearch. Thank you for watching.